When Dr. Lucia Alvarez stepped from the riverboat onto the spongy bank of the Rio Urubumbu, evening insects thrummed like distant engines. The station that awaited her, three thatched huts, a cluster of aluminum tables, and a battered weather mast, was less a laboratory than a promise. She had come to catalog the elusive ghost ferns locals claimed glowed under certain moon phases, but the villagers were more intrigued by her clouded eyes and ivory cane. A blind botanist traveling alone into Amazonia struck them as a beautiful impossibility, a sapling sprouting from stone. Lucia felt the amazement in their questions, the pity folded inside their laughter. What she felt inside herself was different. The fine-edged exhilaration of beginning again. Guides arranged her equipment in familiar patterns, microscopes she would never peer through but could direct others to use, braille notebooks, and an ancient shortwave radio whose cracked solar panel had been lacquered with resin to keep the jungle wet from claiming it. She touched everything slowly, memorizing angles and weights, weaving the map of a world she could not see but would nevertheless navigate, one delicately scented leaf at a time. By the second, twilight clouds had reached down with violet palms and squeezed the last light out of the clearing. Lucia finished labeling a series of sap samples, their surfaces described by fingertip, their scents catalogued in memory. Then powered the radio to catch the 1900H weather update. Static, thick as waterfalls, washed across the frequencies. She tuned past a Peruvian shipping forecast, a Brazilian gospel hymn, the hollow bark of distant Morse, 11 kilohertz higher, a voice cut through like a thread of cool silver, and the macaw, jealous of jaguar footprints, traced its own blue-red path across the morning. Lucia froze. The voice was soft but vivid, each consonant glinting. English, slightly hoarse, not from age, but from speaking seldom. A man, or maybe a very tired angel, he continued. I write this for whomever listens, feathered or otherwise. Tonight's subject is patience. How the river otter teaches it, how the Cape Hope witnesses it, how we barely practice it. I am speaking from the 12-year-old Canopy station that nobody can find on a map, not even me some days. And the wind is rehearsing its old flute in the leaves above. The transmission faltered, tightened, but resumed. Mukaya's thumb hovered on the dial, unwilling to risk losing even a syllable. She forgot the weather, the ghost ferns, the mosquitoes, certain they'd discovered the only warm-blooded creature for miles. When silence finally overtook the frequency, she sat in the darkness long after, radio still pressed to her ear, feeling something she had not felt since childhood. The momentary certainty that the world was larger and kinder than she had previously dared to imagine. Night after night she returned. The mysterious broadcaster used no call sign, only the greeting, "Good evening, invisible friends." He spoke of harpy eagles and glass frogs, told stories shaped like spirals, each one beginning with a breath, ending with a question. He rarely described himself. What emerged seemed accidental. He lived alone in a platform lashed between two Sama Aruma giants. He was a wildlife photographer who printed nothing, storing images on drives he recharged by sun. He traveled the canopy by rope, descending to ground only for water and to tread the patient labyrinth of jaguar country. Lucia pictured hands scarred by bark, a camera grooved along its grips from clove oil meant to deter ants. She pictured, though she could not see, the exact shade of his hair in moonlight. 3 weeks passed before she braved the microphone. The radio had one, a hinged stub of metal like a cricket's leg. A 2200H, when the voice signed off, she cleared hers, heart rattling. "Station in the canopy," she said. "You have at least one invisible friend still awake. Thank you." She let go the transmit key, mortified. The reply came a breath later. "Well now, a friend who speaks." A chuckle, shy but delighted. "Name or alias friend?" "Lucia, Dr. Lucia Alvarez, if formality counts in radio ether." "Lucia?" He tasted it. "I'm Daniel, or I was Daniel. long before the leaves promoted me. Pause. Where are you transmitting from? A research station by the Orubmu. Latitude -2.2, longitude 60 minus and change if my assistant sextant is honest. That's 140 kilometers south-southwest of me. Lucia could hear him smiling. Close, by Amazonian mathematics. Static pealed like distant thunder, the curtain falling on their first true conversation. From then on, their nights twined. Lucia described textures, the velvety undersides of mallow leaves, veins cooling her fingertips like river stones. Daniel painted colors she had never witnessed, yet felt she now possessed. Heliodor, yellow of a snake's eye, the murderous crimson halos within a bromeliad bloom. It traded seconds of their world by sound. She held the microphone beside a stand of sequoia pods, shaking out seeds like dry rain. He offered the booming duets of howler monkeys reverberating through thousand-year trunks. One dawn, after a hurricane of night insects forced them from the air early, Daniel confessed he had begun photographing with her descriptions in mind. Your words tether me to what my lens forgets, he said. Smell, temperature, weight, all the invisible colors. Lucia laughed, afraid her joy might scare him, so bright it felt. And your colors thread themselves through my head. Sometimes I wake reaching for them, certain I can hold turquoise if I squeeze hard enough. Silence, careful, then, we are trading senses, she thought, and falling too quickly through them. Yet the sentence hushed on her lips. He spoke little of his past. She spoke little of the accident that had consumed the membranes of her eyes 6 years ago, though Daniel likely guessed. Instead, they dwelled in the present continuous, what was blooming, croaking, spiraling overhead. Each evening he broadcast a new story, an anteater poem, a meditation on clouds shaped like lost continents. Then he asked, Lucia, are you near the speaker? She would answer, and the world would contract to the width of an electromagnetic thread roping their hearts together. During day, Lucia's research flourished. Without vision, she detected patterns her sighted colleagues overlooked. The ghost fern's glow, she discovered, arose from microscopic spores that refracted moonlight, the same spores once used by Waurani shamans to track hunts at night. She cataloged 3 previously undescribed mosses by fragrance alone. Funding agencies emailed exuberant congratulations, but each evening she closed the laptop early, polished the solar panel, and waited. The rainy season crept upward like a tide. Rivers thickened, insects hatched by the trillion, and cloud roofs sagged so low even the toucans complained. Static entered their channel earlier, lingered later. One night, Daniel's transmission broke mid-sentence. She waited. Nothing but the jungle's hiss. The next night he returned, voice frayed. Lightning kissed my antenna, he explained, forced cheer thin as a leaf skeleton. I rewired with bamboo and hope, but the interruptions multiplied, accompanied by metallic clicks that suggested a wavering power supply. Lucia tried not to imagine him alone on his sky pier, rain spearing from every direction, soldering cables while tarantulas evacuated flooded bark. On an afternoon choked with thunderheads, Lucia's assistant, Guilherme, approached with the radio in both hands. Solar panels delaminated, he said. I can keep it breathing for a week, maybe. A hollow yawned in her chest. She spent that sunset polishing the scratched polycarbonate with banana wax anyway, as if devotion could replace watts. When darkness assembled, she pressed transmit. Daniel, storm damaged my receiver. I may lose you. Static. Daniel, if you hear this, speak 12 minutes past each hour. I'll record. I'll find a way. Static, thick enough to swallow thought. Then his voice surged, shaped by panic she had never heard from him. Lucia, copy. Listen carefully. My station is at 16 meters, canopy of twin Samalumas near the confluence of the Branco and the Jutea. Coordinates -0.659, 67.713. If signal dies, come. Promise. Promise, she breathed. The line dissolved. That night, the radio surrendered for good. Ruby sparks arced within the casing. The panel would not charge. Lucha sat on her cot, exploring the sudden silence. An older version of herself, cautious, academically detached, urged patience. But the version carved by Daniel's nightly stories could not accept a world in which his voice vanished into static forever. By dawn, she had a plan. She enlisted Guillaume to captain the station's Peki motor canoe upriver. The university would disapprove, but funding reports could wait. Love, even half acknowledged, could not. The journey began under a ceiling of terns, their wings scissoring a paper-thin sky. Lucia balanced at the bow, cane folded, her other senses unfurling like the sails the vessel lacked. Each bend in the river she memorized by scent, the crushed cilantro of heliotrope, the varnish of wet balsa, the peppermint exhale of termites at midday. Nights they tied to roots thick as elephant legs and let the engine cool while thunder rolled corridors above. On the fourth dawn, a brown dwarf caiman slid alongside the hull, eye level with Lucia. She heard the water running off scales like deck chains. She spoke to it softly, in Portuguese not to leave. The animal lingered a moment, then withdrew. Guilherme watched her as if she had parted the river. By day 6, they entered a labyrinth of flooded forest where shadows seemed tangible. Here Lucia sensed a latticework of vines overhead, bird calls braided through them. She imagined Daniel's perch somewhere above, his camera clicking like a small mechanical heart. On the 8th night, the engine coughed fatal smoke. They were a dozen kilometers, by Guillerme's estimate, from the confluence Daniel had named. We walk, Lucia said. Boots met water, then spongy ground rising into root buttresses. She tapped ahead with her cane one step, another guiding herself by memory of his coordinates and the conversation of insects that shifted subtly with elevation. At noon, they heard rope creak overhead, the ghost of a pulley. Guillerme cursed in shock. Lucia smiled. We're under him. She cupped hands to her mouth. Daniel! A parrot exploded from the understory, offended. Otherwise, nothing, she called again. Wooden planks tremored 60 feet above. Then the most welcome word she had ever heard. Lucia? She released a breath that seemed to empty her bones. Yes. Are you real? Soaked, scratched, and entirely real. A rope ladder cascaded through leaves, smelling of sap and Daniel's unwashed shirt. Guilherme objected, but Lucia was already climbing, palms noting each knot. Halfway up, a drizzle resumed, slicking rungs. She climbed harder, heart punching ribs like wings. Hands warm, trembling, closed over hers at the platform edge. He pulled her onto cedar boards. The rain quit suddenly, noise replaced by the vocal hush of amazement. She felt his presence before any detail. The radiating heat of a body that had once been only voice. Lucia reached out. May I? She asked. Yes. A ragged whisper. She mapped him by touch. Brows scarred from branches, cheek rough with 3 days' beard, lips curved upward yet unsure. When her fingers brushed the camera harness strapped across his chest, Daniel shivered. He in turn traced the braids of her hair, the line of her jaw where a leaf had scratched an hour ago. I tried to describe colors to you, he murmured, but right now I can't remember any of them. We'll rediscover them, she said, one on top of another. He laughed softly, pressed his forehead to hers. The forest circled them like 1,000 held breaths. Inside the platform hut, equipment lay in organized chaos, lenses drying near a tiny stove, a solar battery half gutted, coils of antenna wire. The smell was resin, sweat, hot metal, the odor of perseverance. Rain resumed on the tarp roof, steady and protective. Guillerme's voice floated from below, asking if he was permitted to photograph the miracle. Daniel shouted permission. The latter shook with a second assent. Together, they drank cacao brewed on the one-burner stove, while Guillerme documented everything. The scarlet ibis that landed briefly on a rail, the improbable handshake of botanist and photographer, new planets aligning. Days blurred. They replaced Daniel's antenna with copper freed from abandoned field phones, patched the solar panel that had failed Lucia's radio, tuned the frequency that had first carried his tales. At dusk, they broadcast together. This is Lucia and Daniel, still invisible to most, very visible to each other, sharing stories from the stitched leaves between two rivers. Listeners emerged fishermen 300 river miles away, an oil platform medic, a child in Iquitos, who asked if they would describe lightning because she had never seen it except through a window. They responded in duet. Daniel spoke shapes and colors. Lucia translated into textures, tastes, the temperature shift a second before a bolt cleaves sky. They received letters poste restante in Manaus, one addressed to the people who teach my ears to see. When the university demanded Lilia's overdue data, she mailed herbarium sheets scented with crushed ghost fern. She included photographs Daniel printed on a portable die, close-ups of spores glowing against her fingertip. The journal editor replied that the imagery was revolutionary. Luminescence mapped not by light, but by touch. At the season's turn, they hiked to a bluff where the forest unfurled in chandeliers of green. Daniel described the vista. Lucia listened, then said, "I'm full. Full of enough color to last a lifetime." He slipped the camera strap over her neck. "Then take mine." She lifted the viewfinder, though sightless. Daniel guided her hands. "Shutter here, focus there. Point toward the sound of the river," he said. The shutter snapped. An unseen heron rose, wing beats echoing like applause. Daniel leaned close. Photo credit, Lucia Alvarez. "If it's blurred, I'll call it impressionistic." They laughed until breathless. The air smelled of wet bark and the molten sugar scent released when sun meets rain. Night swelled. They returned, fingers brushing, then fully interlaced. At the platform, Daniel seated himself before the microphone. "Good evening, invisible friends," he began. "Tonight, the story of a journey made by memory, by faith, and by one cracked radio panel." Lulia placed her mouth near the second mic, and of how two strangers traded senses until neither was a stranger nor senseless at all.